Ring a bell? Ring a bell. Every time one of these acts came up, and every time, at least in Virginia and many of the other colonies, every time that we offered suggestions and resolutions of resistance, you know what the governor would do? Read your Declaration of Independence. He repeatedly dissolved the government. When you read your Declaration of Independence, that is in there for a very good reason. You cannot just say the House of Representatives doesn't exist now because they voted in a way that maybe our current president could do that. What is a quote that I had a dream that a president would one day say? Something along the lines of, I will succeed in my agenda with or without the legislature. Yeah. This went on for a series of years. 1765, 1766, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73. Let's stop at 73. What happened in December of 73? I've heard the word many times tonight. I'll give you a hint. It happened in Boston. The Tea Party. Ladies and gentlemen, I may be known for those words, give me liberty or give me death. But I would much rather be known as a man who put action to resistance. Who put action to simply disagreeing with doing something. That's why when I was standing back there, I realized that you all did not simply need entertaining. You all understand that there's a fight. You all, more than anybody, understand that there's a fight. And you all are preparing for battle. Now, the battle that I speak of is not a literal battle. Not a battle to be fought in physical terms. Not even a rebellion. As was mentioned, I have feelings that the possibility of where we are today was a distinct possibility. Because the system of the government that we have, the system itself, when it was originally established, was flawed. The Constitution, when it was originally proposed to me, I did not attend the convention. I was not involved in the draft of the Constitution, but my friend, Mr. Washington, was, and he sent me a copy of it. And as I read it, I was appalled. I was appalled. We were simply going from one tyranny to another tyranny. What was there to protect us? I don't know of this NSA that you speak of. But what is there to protect us from search and seizure? What is there to protect us as we walk down the avenue? As individuals, as free men? As a matter of fact, when speaking of the Second Amendment, it is rather interesting that many people often say, well, that is simply so we could establish a well-organized militia. Well, certainly the word well-organized militia is in there because we need a well-organized militia. But do you think that we as the founders would put firearms only in the hands of the government when we had just come out of a tyranny? What do some people think? Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't. So when it came time for Virginia to ratify the convention, although I was not present at the convention where it was written, I was there in Richmond when we ratified. When we ratified, I believe the convention lasted some 21, 22 days, something like that. I spoke on 18 or 19 of those days. Sometimes for up to 8 hours at a time. So my hopes is that I will not run over my allotted time tonight. Your hopes are that I will not run over my allotted time tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, with the system of government that we have in place and framed within our Constitution, like no other government in the history of this world, do we need a Bill of Rights. We have a document that only gave power, but there was nothing in there for us. So when it came time to ratify, I argued for a Bill of Rights. I felt that we needed a Bill of Rights. Virginia did ratify without a Bill of Rights. Yes, I did experience defeat occasionally. But the discussion went on, and the Bill of Rights ultimately were added, modeled after Virginia's Bill of Rights, which I helped author. In speaking of the Stamp Act and the events that led up to the American Revolution, it was during that Stamp Act that my colleague at the time, Mr. Jefferson, he later actually was asked about this, but he recalled going back to the Stamp Act, and he said it was the Stamp Act, and it was me, that gave first impulse to set in motion the ball of the American Revolution. John Adams, who you may be familiar with, he went on to say that I was first among all Americans, that no one understood the importance of what was going on more than me. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I appreciate the words from Mr. Adams. George Washington. It doesn't matter about the accolades. That's not what it's about. I recently wrote, this is something I don't often speak publicly about. I recently wrote out my will. Sealed in the envelope with my will, I actually looked back to the Stamp Act. And I wrote out the resolutions that were passed, the 5 resolutions. And I wrote a summary of those proceedings. And while liberty or death may be something that I perhaps one day might be remembered for, the Stamp Act, from a young man just 9 days in the most influential General Assembly in all of the colonies, a young man who wasn't intimidated by the big names, the prestige of the people that were surrounding me. A young freshman Burgess, as it were, spoke up. And I wrote out those resolutions recently. But I want to tell you what I wrote at the end of that paper. And one day it'll be opened. And one day anybody who wants to read it and benefit from it may do so. Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death was certainly a defining moment in our history. There's no doubt about that. That led us into the American Revolution. Brave soldiers fought our battles. But what about the success of this nation? What can guarantee the success of our nation? I wrote the answer to that question, or what I believe to be the answer to that question, in a paper and sealed it in my will. I wrote these words. Whether this, speaking of independence, whether this independence will prove to be a blessing or a curse depends upon the use the people make of the blessings which a gracious God has bestowed upon us.